You're listening to the Beyond the Dojo podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Jeremiah.
So last week was our monthly sparring night. Actually, it was a couple days ago now anyway. And a lot of really cool stuff always happens on sparring night because we're doing this with like some advanced people and a lot of beginners, and we're like introducing them to sparring. So we're like either going through different drills or they're being coached by like higher level Dan ranks or higher level Q ranks. And that was what was happening in our class on Thursday. And I was watching in the corner where one of the orange belt girls, who she had actually come to karate for a while and then stepped away and then came back. Before she came back, we hadn't implemented this sparring night. So she was pretty like apprehensive about like partner work. If she wasn't being a total goofball, like she was kind of afraid of it. So this whole sparring thing was, I think, has kind of thrown her for a loop. But she was partnered up with one of our adult orange belts. So orange belt in our dojo is 7th Q. So they're both 7th Q. And the black belt, Terry, that was coaching them, he was like giving her a little combo to do where it was like jab twice and then reverse punch. And he like said it right in front of both of these students. Like in front of both of these 7th Q students. Dude, and she did it. 1, 2, whack! And I just hear her fist connect with the other 7th Q's ribs. Oh my god, it was so funny. And she was so surprised that it worked, but he was like, of course it worked. What do you mean? And then Jeremiah said, what'd you say, that you saw her doing it over and over again the rest of the night?
Yeah, the rest of the night she was doing that same combo and smacking people, so.
So anyway, that means Q ranks, you should listen to your black belt friends. They give you good advice. Anyhow, so for today's podcast, we decided to do
a book review?
Yeah, kind of a book review. I was just thinking earlier, I was like, oh my god, I never thought that doing book reviews in school would ever be useful.
Actually useful, right?
And here we are doing a podcast talking about a book. But it's not exactly a book review. We're just going to talk about some of the concepts.
Yeah.
So let's see. In the middle of last year or early last year, we had this older gentleman contact the dojo, and he had this book collection, and he asked if we wanted the book collection. And it's crazy because I feel like a lot of people in the karate world are like somehow interconnected somewhere back, and he was connected to some of the people that we know. But one of the books that he gave us was Moving Zen by C.W. Nicols. And, you know, I was like, oh, okay. A very well read book. It's got some
wear and tear.
Yeah, wear and tear. But I didn't get to read it. I didn't read it. So a few months down the road, weirdly enough, one of the 7th Q that I was just talking about, not the girl, but the guy that got smacked, Jeremiah actually lent him this book. So why did you lend this book to David?
Well, I felt like the student, sometimes you get these gut feelings like they're looking for something more than just an activity. Like they're searching for something. And I've been around enough people in martial arts to know like sometimes they're just trying to figure things out. Mm-hmm. And I felt like the book would kind of give them a better understanding of what becoming a black belt is and some of the experiences you had. That way you'd be a little bit more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So. I
think maybe you had mentioned one time briefly that the book is about his journey to black belt, but that didn't dawn on me until I just finished reading the book, and I was like, oh, this is about his journey to black belt. I was like reading through the book. I'm like, oh, it's all these cool experiences. I wonder what happens at the end. Oh, he does his black belt. Yeah, spoiler alert. He gets his black belt. Yeah.
I mean, the book's been out since, 72?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Something like that. So, you had read this book, you said, when you were a kid or when
you
were a teenager?
When I lived in Japan, the beautiful thing about Air Force bases is that they have a very well stocked library. Every base has like these great libraries, and the martial arts section, especially on military bases, are exquisite. Mm-hmm. Like they have every book in them. They had Karate do Kyohan. Jinshi Fukunoka, she's my Karate Dodo, My Way of Life. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was all these books that everybody talked about. I was in Japan, didn't realize that these books were very commonly known amongst American and Western karateka. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, oh, this is a cool book. I'll read it. This is a cool book because I had book reports. Mm-hmm. So I read this book when I was like 7 or 8, 9 maybe. And I didn't really...
You been 7. You didn't start karate until you were like 8, right?
Yeah, so so it'd been like 9 or 10. Uh-huh. I was like halfway there. Like I was purple belt, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So, It was a good book. I kind of forgot about some of it, but then once I read it again, it was back. I remember it. It reminds me of Scott Langley's book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, where he's talking about his experiences.
Yeah, his experiences.
We'll have to talk about some of his books later.
Yeah. But that's what made me think of it the second time I read it. It was like, oh, wow, they had very similar experiences. Mm-hmm. Different settings and stuff, but similar in a sense.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
So what were some of the things that kind of... Because, like, I have a whole list, and I think you have a whole list, like, of
I got,
things.
like, 2.
Oh. Jeremiah has a short list. I have a long list of things that kind of stuck out. Well, what was one of the things you think that was maybe eye-opening in the book, or that was, like, notable?
You know... I mean...
I can go first if you don't think about it.
I gotta think a little bit about it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was interesting because, I mean, this is kind of going to be the main point for me. His whole journey is so, like, that's literally what everyone goes through. That's what I felt. I felt like, I was like, oh my God, this is like a caricature. I mean, not even a caricature because it's not even an exaggeration. This is what everyone goes through to get to black belt. Like, if you are not a karateka and you read this book, it is literally like you could insert anyone's name in here, and essentially the main things that happen in the book happen to most people. I mean, granted, he had a lot of,
well, you got to understand,
fights.
This was set in the 60s and like early 60s. So when people would practice karate back then, it was a little bit more violent.
Yeah, but still, like,
he didn't even focus on that, but he talked about how, like,
well, he talked about that stuff. But I'm just saying that even with they're in a totally different century, essentially. I mean, for me.
Yeah, for you.
They were in a totally different century of him working toward Shodan, and it was the exact same experience. Like, you go through the same mental and emotional journey to get to black belt, which is incredible that it's that synonymous. I mean, maybe that's just our experience, but that's how did you feel like that way too?
I wasn't surprised about how synonymous it was. It's how universal it was.
how the lines don't intersect, but they go side by side. Parallel.
Yes. I just felt like... I don't know how to explain it, man. It didn't surprise me that it was very universal, like this experience that we have as karateka, because I've watched enough people kind of go through their belts and up to Dan ranking and been like, yeah, I could relate in a lot of spots, and a lot of when we talk to people, a lot of the stories they share with, it's relatable.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what binds us together, right?
Yeah.
Is the suffering, not the...
Yes.
I mean, in reality, if you get a bunch of karateka together and they're talking about karate, they're generally talking about the suffering to begin with, and then they talk about their glory days afterwards.
Yeah, we talk about how
horrible it was to do this.
How much we hated training.
Right.
Oh my God.
And then you're like, but then I did this, and it's generally the same conversation.
Sometimes, like, there were certain parts reading the book I was like, should I be tougher as a teacher? Should I make class harder? I'm sure our students wouldn't like me saying that, but
I didn't think it was that.
Hard as it is.
I think the thing that separates the experiences from a Western karateka and a karateka from the East, or someone that trains in Japan, is the cultural differences and what are expected. And Eastern conversation is based on the listener, and Western conversation is based on the speaker.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So, like, in Japanese, some things are just kind of implied.
Okay.
Like, the pencil's over there. And it's for the listener to go, it's in this, kind of figure it out, right?
Like more generalized.
More generalized.
Yeah.
But a Westerner would be like, it's in the desk drawer on the left.
Specific.
It's very specific. There's no kind of interpretation. There's no kind of... And that's a lot to do with the languages.
Right.
But when you teach an art through that language or that filter, some things are lost and some things are very clear.
Yeah.
So to me, it's the same but different.
Right. So it's really interesting because I have heard...
And it's not a surprise. I'm sorry. It's not a surprise.
I've heard mixed reports on, people who've trained through the decades under Japanese, usually in the United States, but then also in Japan. Differences as far as the way that they were taught as far as specificity. So he literally in the book at the beginning he's giving a description of him being taught Zenkuzarachi, being taught front stance, and how much detail he was given as a beginner. And I have heard that training in Japan, at least at one point, the attention to detail was very high versus training in the States. They weren't given as much detail and as much correction.
All right, so from my personal experience, the Japanese teach until you can't show them you can do it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if they say, oh, step and punch, right? They will not teach you anything else.
Right.
Until you show them you have the ability to do it at a certain standard.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So at a beginner, they're not expecting you to do a step and punch like a black belt, right?
Right.
But they expect a very high standard, and they won't teach you nothing. They will refuse to teach you.
Right.
Right. But as in America, or at least within our dojo and the dojos I've been in, the first class you cover about 90% of what we're going to be taught. The basic blocks, stances. We just glaze through it, and then you're going to progress and get better as time goes.
Right.
So you're overwhelmed with information, and then you start to refine. Right. Where Japanese they withhold information until it's refined.
Right. Well, it does say, he talks about his first day in the dojo, and how they walked him through all of his basic blocks, his stances, his kicks, and all that kind of stuff. I think it was maybe just the blocks and stuff.
Yeah,
it just went over some of the basic stuff.
Right.
But
how to make a fist.
Right.
How to punch.
Right.
How to block. No stance.
Right. And then after that, maybe I think his next class or something, they were talking about stances and stuff.
So
and that was when they were going over so much detail about that front stance. That's what I'm saying is
Well, they also typically Japanese karate classes are 2 hours long.
Yeah.
Compared to the Western class of an hour.
Yeah.
When I went through classes starting at 8, it was 2 hours long. You got a 5-minute water break in between.
Yeah.
If you earned it. It was still back in the day where they didn't really care about your safety. Right. Right. And if it was a horrible class, we had no water break. We just kept on going.
Yeah.
And I just think all that put together kind of forces the student to want to improve so they can learn something new. They take advantage of that honeymoon point in karate where they're like, oh, I just started. This is amazing. Yeah. I really want to do this, right?
Right.
And they take advantage of that and say, okay, we're just going to give you a little bit at a time. You can get really good. So by the time you kind of get to orange belt, there's not that, that intermediate,
There were a number of interactions he had with his senpai and his sensei in the book that made me think of that. Think of that interaction with students and laying the law down, hey, you need to practice this and become better at this before we move on to this other thing. And I feel I don't know, whenever I was a Q rank, I felt I was oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I feel sometimes students don't get that anymore. And I don't know if that's a modern thing or because we have so much information at our fingertips, but I felt I just kind of accepted that. Maybe I was just a very good student or something, or
yeah, I think.
But anyway, but they do that. He said that his senpai did that, and he was just oh, okay, yeah. So he just put in tons of work on making these things better before they taught him new things.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I agree with it, and it's just that's everywhere in Japanese culture. That's not karate only. That's in school. That's in everything. That's just the way they see life. Why teach you something if you don't know something before it?
Right. And there was also this great line, and maybe we talked about it while we were reading through the book, but in the book he says, had I wanted to, I was always free to quit. Yeah. And he said slackers, dodgers, and those with poor spirit were ignored on the dojo floor.
Oh, absolutely.
So they didn't kick you out, but what he's saying is you were always even though they were so hard on him in this experience, but if he left, they would be okay, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So here's the cool thing about Japanese to me, and this book kind of this book to me reflected Japanese culture, Japanese approach to karate more than the journey to the black belt. For the second time, it was there's just a lot of Japanese things there. I was oh man, it brought me back, right? And there's good aspects and there's bad aspects, and I like the fact that how they treat people who are lukewarm to training, right?
Yeah.
That is something that all Japanese did, and I want to share a story with this kid I went to karate with in Misawa, Japan, back in started in 87. He was one rank higher than me, and his mother, who was Japanese, and his father was American, just like I was. So same exact situation, but his mother was so active in like the booster club and within the dojo itself, that I think she thought that her son was going to be able to move forward no problem. He failed his first test.
Oh wow!
They did not pass him on his first test.
Oh wow! Because he didn't put forth the effort?
Because he sucked. He was a lazy bum. Like he did not. I mean, he was the kid that caused us to do more basics up and down the floor. Every night he was there. Like if he's there, all of us knew we were going to do more and more basics because he refused to put any effort in. And he left that dojo crying. Oh my God, he was such a crybaby. It just anyways, what I want to bring that up was like, I think the Western mind sometimes can't accept that they're not good enough to learn something new. Like they can't accept that process.
Yeah.
And they fight it the entire time thinking that the process is attacking them personally when it's not. It's just the process.
Right.
This is how we do it, bro. You know?
Right.
But he himself took it personally. Like that little kid at my dojo took it personally. Like every class, he was like, I don't, he would get mad and go, they don't like me. I'm like, bro.
That's really strange.
It's
for me to I mean, we've had conversations with high level instructors who they make the same point. They're like, I can't just give correction to people because if I do, they will take it personal and they'll get upset. Yeah. They'll think that I'm personally attacking them.
Right.
And I don't get that. It's a martial art. Now, granted, for some people it's an important martial art and maybe your whole world revolves around it or whatever.
Right.
But it is just a martial art. It's not. It could be a reflection of your personality and your work ethic. But if a person gives you a correction, it's not because they say that you suck as a person. They're just saying that technique kind of sucks. Here's how to fix it.
Yeah.
I just don't understand that at all.
And it wasn't a racism thing either.
Right,
It was universal. Some of those Japanese kids, man.
Yeah.
They got the shinai worse than anybody.
Yeah, and that's the point that he made. Is he was like, when foreigners came in the dojo, they're treated essentially the same as everybody. I mean, they're expected to work hard and they're expected to put forth the effort, and if not, they get ignored. And there was the issue with the German guys or whatever it was. Like he talked about these German folks that came in, and I can't remember the exact details, but
the problem was the German guy never washed his gi.
And
the hygiene was pretty bad. And he made a very clear point.
But they were also like boorish and
they were boorish.
Didn't try very hard.
Yeah, all they wanted to do was fight.
Yeah,
that was what they wanted to do. Would come over and spar.
Yeah.
And they handled that.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically kicked them out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Let me think of that. What I wanted to talk about was this right here.
But one of the things about slackers and dodgers, those with poor spirit, that I think he was kind of referring to foreigners, but that would be pretty much anybody.
Anybody.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I read when he was talking about this. It says they are disciplined, idealistic people, and karateka is generally practiced. I'm sorry. They are disciplined, idealistic people, and karate, as it is generally practiced in Japan, is disciplined and idealistic. Like and to me that describes how they treated slackers. It's like, this is important to me. How dare you disrespect me? And they just like, I ignore you. And I to an extent, I kind of agree.
Yeah. See, that's really difficult as an instructor. Like, let's say it's from our perspective. Yeah. This is our life, sort of. I mean, we've got other things that are our life, but this is a huge part of our life, and we have dedicated many years of honing our art, and we're sharing that as instructors with others, and yet you choose to not even try. And once again, had conversations with high-level instructors who are like, why should I bother?
Right.
Some instructors get to that point, like, why should I bother helping you when you're not going to put forth the effort?
Exactly. If nothing's going to change, why should I waste my time?
Yeah.
I agree.
That's tough. Because then there's also this other side of like the way that much of the West views a teacher, and like a teacher goes out of their way to try to provide an environment and a path for you to be able to move forward. And I also resonate with that. I understand like you have to be able to meet someone where they're at, but then by the same token, you are in a martial art. There's a reason that things are done the way that they are.
Right.
And obviously we're having similar experiences based on what we just read.
And obviously they're the teachers are going to be more patient with younger students, and children. It's different, obviously, but at the same time, they're very, very, very idealistic, very disciplined, very idealistic. So, and then that becomes that thing with the loyalty, and now we're I think it kind of bleeds over to the organizations and politics of karate.
Yeah.
Where they kind of expect certain people to be loyal to certain things, right? And then how dare you not be?
Yeah.
So that was. That part of the book, that first part of the book of watching him kind of get used to it, and then him talking about like how he felt so lonely. Like he was amongst a lot of people but felt so lonely because he didn't have his own small group.
Yeah.
And then he finally moved into that house with the other foreigners.
Right.
And Don Drager, that name sounds so freaking familiar.
You think we would have looked that up before we start recording this?
If any of y'all know that guy, let me hit us up in the comments, because I cannot put my finger on it, but I swear to you, I heard that name several times. He
co-wrote Practical Karate with Nakayama, is what he was saying. So we have that book as well. It was given to us with this one.
That might be what it is.
So it was like application based.
So this guy's like the OG of like Westerners in Japan learning martial arts.
Yeah.
And he's learning like martial arts that aren't mainstream.
Right.
Like jiu-jitsu and all this other stuff. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And anyways, like I said, if y'all know anything about him on the west state side, if he's locations around, just hit us up in the comments. But that part of the book was really hit home too, like how he was like, I had to find my group, I had to be part of this. And when I was training in Japan, since I was like, after like the first 8 months, I was by myself. I was the only American for freaking years. And then at the end, an older couple joined us, but I totally caught that too, because the Japanese let you in so far, and then they're like, nah, you're still a Westerner.
Right.
You're still gaijin.
Yeah.
So it is really weird, and I could relate with that completely.
And loneliness is an issue regardless of culture, because, I mean, after you train for... I mean, granted, he was early in his training, but after you train for so long, you do get very lonely because there's hardly anybody else left around for you to train with, oftentimes.
But this guy was an Antarctic explorer.
Arctic
explorer, right? Where... So to me, it would have been like, I think he would have got used to being by him, isolated.
I think he went with a group.
Yeah, he did. I think so. I think because it was exploration. He was some kind of scientist. Anyways,
he was a fancy smart guy.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that it wasn't about JKA karate. It was about learning the experience and enjoying, learning the art in Japan. And that whole thing. And I really just enjoyed it. It was a good read. There
were a couple of other things that happened in the book that were just like, oh my gosh, that is just so, that's just so karate. Apparently it's just quintessential karate. There was, let's see, talking about tournaments and the whole deal. This was the time period where
that started becoming big.
Yeah, tournaments started becoming big, and there was this concern about people watching tournaments and just becoming like, what did they call them? Like couch cushion, like spectators, giving their input. We call them keyboard warriors in our time. But essentially people who were sitting on the sidelines and criticizing those who were actually sparring. For some reason that was a big concern of theirs. But they were concerned about tournaments, which I think that's still kind of an issue, which we have talked about a couple of times on our podcast. Yeah. And then another one was talking about the arrogance of being a brown belt.
Ooh.
When you get my to that goodness. Point and you're on the cusp of black belt, and you're the big dog in the Q ranks, not a non rank, and that brown belt level is just to cut you down a few feet, right? Man. Just to swipe away at you.
And the way they did it in the book was really they just beat the tar out of them.
Oh yeah.
That's how I was like, okay. I remember hearing stories. I've never seen anybody get, manhandled like that.
Yeah.
Not in Japan. In the States I've had, but not in Japan.
Yeah.
But good Lord. And then what was weird is like towards the end of the book, so Kanazawa was giving him private lessons to work on his katas and everything else for his testing. And he came in early for the private lessons, but watched his senpai, his really close friend, his senpai from the beginning of his karate journey, get beat down. I mean, like, beat down. He said he could barely get up. He was he was wheezing. He was crying. I mean, it was his thing, and he was embarrassed to see it because he didn't want to see his senpai not be that formidable person, but this actual human being who could take a whooping, right?
Yeah.
And I think he said he went back in the office and tried to not look or not pay attention, and one of the office sensei was talking to him about it. Said, that's part of karate. Sometimes you have to train your spirit more than anything else.
Right.
He goes, it made sense the way the guy said it, but it was like, oh God, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah, and it was interesting too, like, he talked about Kanazawa a whole lot, like, the second half of the book, and just how kind of a person he was, and, like, he shows, like, how generous Kanazawa was. He, like, gave him private lessons, and gave him and when he was coaching him on Konkudai, in order to get ready for his Shodan exam, he had him do it, like, 20 times before
he even watch it.
Oh my God. It brought back memories because whenever I think I was Shodan getting ready for Nidan, we're just going over stuff. I think I was. Maybe it was before Shodan. And my teacher would make me do Konkudai over and over and over. And that was after a super hard, like, hour and a half class. Like, very intense class. And then I would have to do Konkudai over and over and over again. Now, he's having to do it before class. But, like, that kata is the devil. Okay? It's difficult. I do like it, but it's very long. And, holy cow, it's a workout in and of itself. So that brought back memories. But he was saying that as he was going through it, Kanazawa would only give him 1 to 2 corrections, I think maybe per rep or, like, at a time. So he wanted him to work on just those couple of things before moving on to something else, which is interesting because I think you have, like, like, a spectrum of how teachers give correction. Like, some of them will just throw everything at you at once depending on the scenario, or they won't give you anything because maybe they don't know. But to give just one correction at a time is at least maybe something that you can manage and chew on, and I feel like I
don't think it's as much as a teacher's stylistic choice, but more of meeting the student.
Maybe that's more of meeting the student.
Right. Maybe he was like, I better just give him this one correction because he's Western and
he's the Western guy.
They're kind of British.
Yes. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I kind of work on usually one thing at a time. Maybe my mind just works that way, but I'm just like, okay, I have to get this one thing down before I add on something else because I don't think I have a very good. It's harder to correct more than one thing at a time, to be honest. Right. Like, if you can focus on just one thing and at least get a basic handle on that correction, then you layer the next one on top of it. Even if you're trying to solidify the first one, to me that just makes it a little bit easier to get through it.
I agree.
Yeah.
You got a really long list, babe.
I do have a really long list. I have not talked about all of these. I just made notes every time I thought something was interesting or relatable or whatever. Another two actually. One kind of on the same boat was after he gets Shodan, his first class, Kase Sensei is teaching, and they start going through Heian Kata. So I think they went through Heian Shodan, and they start getting corrections on Heian Shodan as new Shodans. Yep. And I personally make it a point when our students hit, like, maybe they hit green belt level, or then again when they hit brown belt level, we literally break down the Heian katas because there's so much there, and we've seen in our dojo that it is an issue, just like he said, oh my God, that all these Shodans neglected all their Heian katas. That's literally what he said. Like, they were having trouble even remembering them. And we have the same problem in our dojo
all the time.
And we're trying to implement systems to make sure that the students are remembering those katas. Like, we require, we'll pull them out randomly on exams, or like we make them do them. Jeremiah has them do them like 3 different hand katas before class even starts, before we even warm up or anything. They have to do it on their own. The intermediates do, the kids anyway. And then with the adults, like the advanced adults, I have them go through their hand katas, like all of them, every class, so they don't forget them. But they're actually doing corrections, and that's what we've done. We've done. I mean, I did that at shodan level, at nidan level, and then many times over at sandan level. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like 8 months working on one hand kata, and another 8 to 12 months working on another one. And not to say that you're only working on one correction, working on many corrections, but there's so many that are found within all of these different types of movements.
Right. And the beautiful thing is that the hand katas are so fundamental that when you get them pretty sound, like when you improve them, no matter what, your rest of your karate improves.
Yes. And
that is why they emphasize it so much. And that's why you constantly have to work on those katas. Those should be your bread and butter.
I'm going to say something a little controversial. When we go to seminars, sometimes teachers will ask the students, what kata would you like to work on? Most of the time, they will offer up a kata for everyone to work on, and they will teach that kata. In either case, if you have the option of choosing which kata to work on, you should select a lower level kata. A good teacher will be able to teach advanced concepts through a lower level kata. Because a lot of fundamentals are there anyway, so you got to get those down as it is. But oftentimes those can be taught at a higher level, especially if you're a really good teacher. I'm not saying that I can do that by any means. Okay, we're not making that claim. But I'm just saying from experience, oftentimes being able to do it in a simpler pattern is actually an easier way to kind of get a grasp of some, not only your fundamentals, but some of your more advanced concepts as well. And then when you go back and work on your more advanced katas, you can apply it there. Obviously, there's a time and a place to work on advanced kata, but I'm just saying, sometimes it's great whenever you have a guest instructor or you have someone that you're visiting to train with, to have them do the really basic stuff for you.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, we've seen really good examples of that.
Yeah.
There was one more that I saw that once again we have seen and experienced. At the end of the book, he says there was a Filipino guy that shows up and he wants to test for Nidan.
Yeah.
And he's watching. I mean, this guy Nicols just tested for shodan, like I assume not very long before this. So they're watching this guy test for Nidan, and he was like, it was awful. He was like, his basics were awful. His kata was awful. Like, he didn't even know what they were talking about for some reason with kata. So I'm not sure if like he was lying when he said he was a Shotokan practitioner, or like what the deal was, but he was apparently awful, and like the instructors had pity on him because they were like, well, his sensei obviously did not teach him very well.
Right.
But then he
that's not pity, that's truth.
Well, he did say that they were kind of having compassion on him, and they didn't like mock him. They just said, wow, that was awful, and no, you didn't pass. But he said that Nakayama actually took the guy aside and explained to him, like, hey, this is why you didn't pass, and this is why you're not ready. I mean, which to me is incredible that he did that, especially for a foreigner.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But he said, dude wasn't even good green belt level. How many times have we made that comment?
I mean, we've heard that a lot.
We've heard that a lot, and we have said that a lot.
All right, so the second little thing that I wrote down was, it goes, moreover, I believe that the path of Tai Chi Chuan and Karate, and indeed all the martial arts, lead to the same goal, tranquility. Mm-hmm. And I think, we always think that modern karate or modern martial arts are looking for the spiritual thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that they're looking for the thing, the Zen, the tranquility, whatever, your peace, inner peace, whatever you want to call it, right? I think that is the thing that has drawn most people to karate, is that search for the mystic inner peace or the tranquility that has been portrayed by martial artists.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. Yeah. I'm guilty of it because, and what's crazy for me is that I'm not guilty of it at my younger, youthful days. I'm guilty of it now. Like, I trained a lot of times to improve my karate, to be better at my craft. Right. But I also trained to just get my mind off of crap. clear my mind, meditate in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And that, it does bring tranquility to me. If it definitely calms me down, it definitely gets me in a better mood.
Well, that's the whole concept, I think, that he was saying about it being karate being moving Zen.
Yeah.
Is that you're doing that, you're in that tranquil space, and yet you're moving. Actually, the first time I ever heard this term, was Rick Houghton said it, I believe, and I had never heard of this book before. I didn't realize that that's where it came from. But essentially, that's what it is like, you're working at that place mentally, but you're continuing to move. That's the point that he was making. But there was something else in that quote, though.
What'd you say?
There was something else in that quote, though. Was talking about multiple martial arts. So at the beginning of the book.
Ooh.
Now, you know what's so funny about this is that I have heard this quote multiple times in completely different scenarios ever since we had this discussion with this guy, with our student David, that we gave this or lent this out to. I almost said rented it to, like it was a freaking video store. He lent it to.
I got a funny story about that.
About a video store?
About lending it out.
Yeah, he'll explain that in a minute. So he who chases two rabbits catches neither.
Yeah.
And it was funny because we had this conversation with David, our student, and he was like, I thought about trying another martial art at the same time, but then I started reading the book and I saw that quote and I was like, maybe I should just stick with just one for a while. And I've heard that in other contexts, in as far as martial arts goes, and then also in completely different areas.
I think it's a Chinese proverb, ain't it?
I'm not sure, but it's interesting because what that quote that you just read was saying is that they all lead to the same place. And I've heard the same thing, like whether you're going the karate route or the aikido route or the jiu-jitsu route or whatever other martial art, it's like they all kind of converge at some point. So on a really high, really refined level, they're all going to come together at some point, almost like this like epitome of mixed martial arts, sort of. But you're essentially coming to that same point. So I think maybe it's referring to spiritually or mentally, but I also feel like your movement starts to look very similar to others. I think it's physically too. Yeah, I think you start to look a little bit less karate-esque at a higher level, and you look a little less aikido-esque at a higher level because there's got to be some little bits of other martial art influence there, sort of, in order to make it
pure movement's pure movement.
Yes.
No matter what you're doing, aikido, judo, whatever.
Movement's
good movement, right? Mm-hmm. And refinement through martial arts gives you that. And the longer you do it, the better you are, right? Especially if you're driven to be more efficient. And I think that's and personally, that's how I interpret it. All leads to the same place.
Yeah.
Because when your movement's refined like that, it doesn't matter how you move it. I'm awed by the movement, how he does it, not what he's doing,
right,
or she's doing, right? So, I think that's what it means to me. Is that? I don't know.
That's what it means to me.
That's my truth. No.
So what were you gonna share, Jeremiah?
Nothing. I just brought it up. Oh.
What does that say? Internal temp too high. Okay, so we blew up our camera, but Jeremiah's gonna share with you a fun story.
No, I'm not.
You're not gonna share it? Should I share it?
I was just joking with you.
Oh, okay.
I'll put you on the spot.
Right,
I'm not going to share you like that.
All right. So, what you working on?
Well, for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, nothing really. My right ankle's kind of wonky. I had Sean, our friend Sean. Oh, watch videos. Okay, I had Sean look at the ankle and see what it was, and for a while I thought it was like the tendons or something around the ankle that was sore, and he went through and palpated through, and there was nothing there, and he stuck his thumb in my ankle joint from the front side in, and I was like, oh, that's the spot. He's like, that's not tendon, that's not muscle, that's the joint, dude. So he kind of maybe suggested lightly that it could be a bruised bone, or it could be even a slight fracture, because
I kicked it in the ankles.
Yeah, well, I got flat feet, and I try to do gankaku too much.
Oh, okay.
I really think that me working on that move really just irritated it.
Yeah.
Doing it too much. But, so I took the last week and a half, 2 weeks, just kind of chilled on training, let it heal up.
Yeah.
What you been working on?
Not being sick. So we got really sick. Our whole household got sick. Really what I'm working on is stepping in Zenkusadach and not swinging my leg out to the side like a big dork. But really over the past couple of weeks, not much has been going on by way of training because we got sick. Yeah. But that is what I'm working on. And it's weird how hard it is to fix something like that you've been doing for years and years. And like you probably don't even realize you're doing it. You know what? You should just pause this podcast and turn on your phone on the video section and just film yourself stepping forward in front stance and watch what your feet do.
Just because you have the problem doesn't mean everybody else does.
You probably have a problem too. You probably have some kind of problem. Anyway, mine is very weird and like it's like when girls run and their knees knock together and their feet flip out to the sides. That's what I look like. That's terrible. So anyway, that's
pretty accurate. Yeah.
That's pretty much what it looks like, but only on one side, not on both sides.
Yeah. That's the weird part.
Which is even weirder. But it's like left leg forward, which I feel like all the problems are left leg forward because all the bad habits are there. Yeah. But anyway, and actually, it's not even just with stepping. It's starting in Hamni, turning to Shomen, and then stepping forward. That's the problem. Yeah. So it's that hip rotation into the step. It's like the upper thigh just doesn't stop rotating. And it just keeps going. And then my foot just flips out to the side.
Nice. It's called flare.
So like I know what is causing the problem, but I don't know how to fix it. So anyway, that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, life of a karateka.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Where you just repetitively tell ourselves that we suck.
That's not really what we're doing. But
the simplest things.
We can say it that way and it sounds funnier.
So. It does.
Anyway, okay. Well, this was fun.
Anyway.
Bye.
Bye.